When most people come down to Waikiki Beach on a beautiful afternoon, they see a great day for paddleboarding or just soaking in the sun on the beach. John Marra is an avid surfer, so he understands the appeal. But Marra also sees a sea and landscape undergoing dramatic changes due to climate change.
If you look, there's just a couple little patches of sand, and it's on those couple of patches of sand there are fairly high concentrations of people. You don't need a whole lot of change in sea level. Right now the tide range is only a couple, 3 feet. So when I talk about a change of a foot, maybe by 2050, I'm talking about these beaches that we're looking at now being non-existent most of the time.
Marra is the Regional Climate Services Director with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the East-West Center. He helped author a recent report about what kind of changes we can expect to see in the Pacific. In his office, he demonstrates an animation depicting temperature changes over the last century. It's clear our global thermometer is rising. Marra says that's because of elevated levels of CO2.
It's been sitting mostly at 300 parts per million for most of human history. It's sitting at about 390 right now. Under our sort of most current projections where we're headed in terms of parts per million of CO2, we're looking at probably double that, maybe 3 times that by the end of the century. So we're up into somewhere between, let's say, 600 and 1,000 parts per million. We haven't been anywhere like that for 20 to 30 million years. And so we're moving into a place that we've never really been as human beings.
The predicted impact of global warming for the ocean waters that surround Hawaii is frightening. The warming sea causes coral bleaching, which could kill many of our reefs. Eventually, there might even be too much CO2 in the ocean for critical plankton to form.
Potentially it has catastrophic implications because if the whole, the ocean food chain collapses, that just goes out, those impacts are immense on human populations and the whole ocean ecosystem as we know it.
Later this week, the University of Hawaii is hosting an international climate change conference called Waves of Change. Marra is one of the featured speakers at the conference. He says beyond doing our part to turn off the spigot of CO2, what is important for Hawaii is that new policies are adopted. He calls this process climate proofing.
A lot of these actions that we're talking about for climate adaptation planning are the same things you would do for disaster risk reduction. If you're siting development further inland to avoid potential flooding during hurricanes, you're also doing climate adaptation planning. And you're increasing sustainability because you're decreasing the potential impacts on your infrastructure and having to rebuild these sorts of things.
One specific change that Marra says will be necessary is changing the way taro is grown.
Potential is that taro is inundated with saltwater, basically saltwater intrusion, and so the taro crops in low-lying atolls and other areas isn't going to be successful. So what can we do to begin to address that? And I'm not an expert in this, but there are folks that are doing that, and they're doing a couple things. One, they're looking for crops that are more salt tolerant, so they can withstand these events. The other thing they're doing is looking at things like literally, almost, I guess you could say, put the taro in a planter if you like, but basically build, concrete troughs that they can essentially then keep the water, the salt water from entering into the soil where they're growing the taro. So it's all, like I said, it's almost like a planter.
For Civil Beat, I'm Joe Rubin.